Hello, colleagues, and welcome to the next episode of DINCast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Hans Balmaekers, who's the chief. Yes, he's the chief of innovators, this global network of innovators from around the world. And we're going to be talking about where next for innovation. So welcome, Hans. Welcome along today.
Thanks, Ian. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So for those people who weren't part of the summer program that we ran with yourselves, just tell us a little bit about yourself and I suppose your career, your journey, and how you've ended up growing innovators.
Yeah, so in fact, you're asking me to share all of my past lives. But there's a few. I've made some non-obvious career steps. So I actually was trained as a lawyer. It's something I don't necessarily tell too often to too many people, but I am. So there's no hiding for that. I practiced law for 2 years. Didn't like it. Was only trying to get employers and employees to not fight where they were constantly fighting. So I wanted to move to something more creative and positive. So I switched into an HR role. At least I thought that would be more creative and positive. It wasn't always, let me put it mildly. So I found myself again wondering, hey, what do I want to do? I joined a company that was actually at that point in time starting a transformation. So I find myself suddenly as an HR professional in my day job, but in my side role, I was heading up a young professional network in that company, and we grew that network heavily all around the world. But we also shifted its focus from being a social network to a more of an innovation network. I mean, it's not innovation in the breakthrough type of things, but we got thousands of people in this company to do act upon small ideas, and that's really where I found my passion for innovation. That's also how and when I understood how difficult it sometimes is, and that's also in the end what. And I'm kind of making a longer story short. That's also how I ended up taking over a small conference about entrepreneurship that I attended and I liked what I saw, but I also thought, hey, this could be better, bigger, and I took it over, and that has become Innovators. So yeah, I have an experience in trying to lead innovation change from within a large organization that didn't always lead to quote unquote success, and because of experiencing the pain and pleasure of it, that's where I felt the need also for creating Innovators as a network for people with innovation in the title, to help them to be successful. So that's my life in 1.5 minutes.
and you've done that really successfully in terms of you've now got this global network of talent and entrepreneurs and innovators who you bring together on a regular basis. You've got this real sort of community there. So I know in the past you would have that physical environment where you would bring people together. We're no longer in that sort of position. So how has your approach and your thinking had to change in this COVID world?
Well, in a way, for us, the good thing is that we experienced already before COVID happened with virtual formats. So actually, last December, almost a year ago, we hosted a virtual summit. I remember still a lot of corporate attendees needed to install Zoom on their private laptop because their corporate laptop didn't allow for that. So we were doing a virtual summit for like 2,500 people, I think, last year December. So we were in that sense prepared because we were planning for doing more online events. But at the same time, what we didn't necessarily plan for was the Zoom fatigue and folks not necessarily being prepared for doing everything online and having homeschooling and all these things. So I must say that the format that we used last year, albeit virtual, has evolved quite a lot. So in a way, most of our community members are very busy. That's for sure. They're time poor. But they do appreciate being able to speak to fellow innovators from other companies. And so really, I think if I look back, the model really has changed mostly towards more conversation style and, allowing for that and fostering those connections versus I've seen some players move towards a kind of Hollywood production type of content type of style, which nothing wrong with it, but I just feel like, and our members tell me that they appreciate more the open conversation. So when we're doing events, we're curating and creating content, but the focus really is on those conversations.
And obviously, you know, the upside of sort of going virtual is you can reach a lot more people sort of more often. But has, in your view, from the conversations you have, do you think it's made it harder or easier to collaborate and be innovative?
Well, you know, for us as a business, we've been hosting events all around the world since we started. So in a way that, you know, that's also not new for us. But if I look at our audience day to day, I mean, there is a lot of things that you can do virtually, but there's also a lot of things that you miss. So yes, there is great tools or platforms. And there is virtual design sprints. I saw an actual quote unquote house being built on this mural tool where you can like hop over from workshop room one to another workshop room, which almost gives you the feeling of like, hey, we're in a, you know, almost like a workshopy setting. But the big but here is that I for one believe very much in the power of bringing people together face to face, you know, in a room. And so there is more and more research now that shows that yes, there is some efficiency in like using online tools, but you do miss out more and more on that social cohesion, on this intangible, you know, stuff that happens when you are in a room together. And so I would think that on the long run, and it might not be immediate and not even obvious, like not even visible, but I would say, yeah, we will lose out on these nuances in their relationships, and that translates then probably into the ideas and the quality of the ideas and the you know the collaboration around those ideas. So there's a lot of, let's say, levels that in the end will be, I think, negatively impacted by only being virtual. And of course, you know, there is ways to keep the good of virtual, but then also go back to the good of the what do you call it, face-to-face physical, you know, once allowed, because I think that the power is in the combination of both.
So, as you say, you've worked, you know, support leaders and organisations, build this community of innovators. You know, what achievements are you most proud of? You know, if you're talking to people or family or friends, and you say, "Gosh, I'm really, really proud of what we've achieved here." What would some of those examples be?
You know, it might sound cheesy, but I think it's actually one of the most powerful things. So leading innovation, doing innovation sounds sexy and glamorous, but it isn't, right? It is often not as fun as it sounds. And it's not about the next gimmick. In a way, what you're trying to do as an innovator, of course, there's a new product or service, maybe based on the technology, hopefully based on consumer needs, right? There is this whole, how do you actually do innovation, which is an art and a science, but also an art in itself. It's a new job, right? It's a new craft. It's a new function in most organizations. So that's a difficult thing. But more often, the even more difficult thing is the whole kind of alignment with the organization. It's the getting this, you know, stakeholders and the sponsors. It's the resistance that you'll face, even though the CEO on television tells how innovation is so important. But in reality, you know, there's a lot of focus on the core business, on the existing quote unquote cash cow, hopefully at least. You know, so there is a lot of stuff that comes with doing innovation and being an innovator. So the one thing I'm most proud of is really that we've been able to, well, help us to, is not a good word, but create this supportive environment for people with innovation in the title to be, you know, open and vulnerable, to talk about the challenges. And so the conversations that we have at our conferences and also during our online sessions, it is a lot about, you know, how do you deal with XYZ? How do you manage, you know, this particular challenge? And so creating that environment where companies are, in a way, sometimes even competitors, but they're opening up, because this is not about technology that are competing with, for example, but it's really about this management of innovation journey. You know, that's really what I think the value is of innovators and what I'm most proud of. You know, I liked, I think as we've discussed previously, and, you know, I like traveling and I like seeing those places. That's a great add-on, having all these conferences and all these fancy places. But yeah, really being the support network, that's my number 1 and 2 and 3 answer to your question.
That's brilliant, because I mean, you sort of started to touch on there about white culture and, you know, the impact that culture can have. And why do you think it's so hard to get a culture of innovation in, particularly in large organizations?
You know, it's culture is one of these things. I once heard someone say in that company that I referred to earlier, culture is not what you put on like a spreadsheet or in a PowerPoint deck. It's how people behave, and in general, and there's a good reason for that. The organizations as we know them are designed to execute upon existing proven business models, and in many companies there's long-ranging investments into technology and into plans and into whatever machine equipment, whatever. All of the organization is designed supposed to deliver upon expectations. There is plans and there is shareholder expectations, so we need to deliver upon that. So organizations by nature need, the culture supporting that goal. So if you then as an innovator you try to create the new, in the wildest dreams, you try to self-disrupt the company, but maybe on a smaller scale, you come up with new products and services. In one way or another, you often are eating, maybe potentially eating someone's lunch, or at least stepping onto people's toes, right? Because you are disrupting, this whole idea of like, hey, we're supposed to deliver upon a existing operating model. So a culture of innovation in that sense, it's hard, but at the same time, I think we're getting to a realization that, hey, the world is changing faster than most organizations are, and so there's another famous saying by this former GE chairman. Jack Welch, right? If the outside is learning faster, like changing faster, and you're learning, you're dead, right? So we're starting to understand that we cannot just stick to operating and running the machine. We need to think about the future, and we need to come up with a new machine, or at least potential new machines. And so the culture of innovation in that sense would then, for me at least, mean creating an environment where we can learn in the sense of like, running experiments, testing, and figuring out what consumers want and how technologies can be applied, but creating this environment where this learning happens. And I would say that it starts to happen, but it needs so far still a protective environment, because otherwise, again, the priorities of the day-to-day, the running business will take over.
And as I've mentioned before, you run a global network of innovators. Do you notice any geographical differences in the approach to innovation across countries and across continents?
Yeah, what I've always found fascinating is Asia, right? So there is, I'm a Dutch guy, and in Dutch we have a word polderen, which is it's always about consensus, right? Everyone wants to be heard, everyone wants to be involved, and in the end, the solution needs to reflect everyone and everybody's and everything. So there's good things to that. But what I liked, in a way, about Asia's approach to innovation is often that it's a lot more top down, right? So if you look at, for example, the adoption of digital payments, or at least cashless payments, it's going so fast in most parts of Asia. So in a way, the consumer habits, but also the way like how companies and also governments deal with it's a lot more direct, because there is a lot more, like, say, top down nature of it. There's pros and cons to that. I'm aware of that, but I would say yes, there is, and that is a difference that I see. For example, Asia versus the rest of the world. I must say that especially after COVID happened, I felt in Europe, at least with people based out of Europe, a lot earlier and a lot stronger commitment and confidence in the future. Whereas maybe because there was an election in the US and a lot of things going on, there was a lot longer, a lot more uncertainty and chaos in the let's say US, mostly US context. So, but that's a more recent, after the pandemic difference that I didn't see before. But yeah, those would be two differences I would say that I spotted.
And when we've spoke before, one of the things that we've both agreed on is the importance of failure in innovation and the failure of learning. But so many organizations are sort of set up to, manage out failure and measure, things that will help them, not fail, kind of thing. How can we sort of change that approach to actually get people to understand that failure is a natural part of learning?
Yeah, it's a tricky. I mean, it's a crucial topic, and it's a tricky one because, of course, I don't want my surgeon to fail, an experiment when I'm being surgeon. I mean, there's things that a context in which you don't want to allow failure. But coming back to my point earlier, of course, most of the organization is supposed to deliver, and so then there is little margin for error. But if you never create an environment where you can consciously seek out learnings, and for me, failure in a way should lead to learnings. It's not about failing all the time and every time and doing the same thing all over again. For me, failure is testing, seeing what works, and if it doesn't work, adjusting the approach and moving on. And so coming back to the culture, I think there is a bit more of an acceptance about failure rephrased as learning. However, I for one, I'm still seeing that, we all talk about also in innovation land, hey, it's okay to fail, but if you do happen to be the person responsible for that project or that venture that fails, it's not necessarily that outspoken, but your career will be feeling an impact of it. I mean, it's still true, and in that sense, I think we still have a long way to go. But coming back to my point about culture earlier, I think we're starting to also understand that, it takes some of these quote unquote protected spaces to get to that learning.
So, you're quite a forward-looking organisation. You've naturally got to be around that. Which areas do you think are ripe for disruption and innovation, or which sectors are you most excited about, or technologies for the future?
It's in a way, it's funny, I've been doing this innovation thing for years, and until recently, and I'm even almost like hesitant to say that out loud on your podcast publicly, but until recently, I didn't even use a banking app myself. So I just used the old internet banking stuff because it was just easier. I didn't bother to install an app on my phone. So for me, there is a lot of that still happening, as I mentioned earlier, also with payments. I mean, there is some of these industries where change will come and will come fast. But for me, the only real kind of innovation disruption has to be around how we collectively, as a species on this planet, live and eat and go about our lives. Because hey, we have a planet with at least as it seems a finite set of resources, and we're not necessarily treating it very well. So I think all of the disruption, the most important disruption, the opportunities for disruption, mind you, this is a business thing. It's not just a philosophical thing. It has to do around, climate and sustainability or regenerative business models. So I think in every industry, there is so many opportunities for us to, on the one hand, tackle the challenges around climate change, but at the same time also create a more just and equal society. So I think all brands across industries have a role to play there, have huge power, have huge assets, client bases. I mean, every organization should take these things into account. So for me, that's really where we all should focus on a lot more in the next years.
Well, look, Hans, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. I always enjoy our conversations, and I really look forward to working with innovators more in the future as well. So thank you very much for your time today.
It was a pleasure. And I actually envisioned we had the pint as we discussed, right? Having the pint in the pub. Thanks, Ian, for the conversation.